Alrighty, so today I'll be talking about a series of chick radio tracking studies we conducted between 2014 and 2017 and the implications for future chick radio tracking studies. So as many of you are aware, shorebird species and populations across the Flyway are declining rapidly, the causes of which are diverse, but major driving forces include land reclamation, climate change, overharvesting, land use change, and in many cases, poor reproductive success. So for many species, the causes of chick mortality remain a critical information gap, especially for highly threatened species where conservation agencies may want to improve reproductive success, for example, like the New Zealand shore plover or spoonbill sandpiper. However, this isn't straightforward as monitoring of shorebird chicks is extremely difficult. The two methods available to determine survival at the moment are targeted monitoring, so routine follow-up of broods using their last known location, and ideally uniquely coded or uniquely ID'd parents, and of course radio tracking. So targeted monitoring is really great and cost effective and very accurate in terms of survival if you can monitor the brood routinely. However, it does have some drawbacks, including in complex habitat, broods can be difficult to locate. And I know this from firsthand experience. One of the chicks that one of the species I've recently radio tracked, the red-capped plover chicks in a disused salt pan with highly vegetated berms, making a lot of places to hide and not being able to see over each berm into the next salt pan made it quite difficult to track. Broods can move substantial distance. So for hooded plovers, for example, they raise their chicks on high energy ocean beaches. And if there's not another pair of hooded plovers nearby, they can take their chicks within days of hatching up to 2 kilometers from where they hatched. And unless you actually manage to find a carcass, which doesn't happen very often, it can rarely confirm the cause of death of chicks. In contrast, radio tracking can be quite expensive, and as I'm sure many of you are aware, but can better facilitate the location of broods in difficult to monitor habitat. Thanks to the directional nature of radio tracking, can assist in locating broods that have moved a great distance. And as you can see, me in this photo here can accurately allow for the location of carcasses in at least some cases. So if we want to find out more about the chick mortality of a given species, and we've chosen to use radio tracking, however, first there is some animal ethics and animal conservation implications to consider. So radio tracking obviously requires the capture of the chicks within hours or days of hatching, which can cause substantial stress to the chicks and the parent birds, on top of the potential negative impacts of survival of the actual transmitter through either the additional weight of the transmitter itself or through complications from whatever the chosen attachment method is. And in this case, potential tracker-induced mortality can have really substantial implications for highly threatened species, like those I mentioned before, if there is a high rate of tracker-related chick mortality occurring, not to mention the fact that it's potentially compromising or not representative of chick mortality, so it compromises your results. So to answer these questions here, we radio tracked masked lapwing chicks, red-capped plover chicks, and hooded plover chicks in consecutive breeding seasons as part of a project looking into sex differences and trying to ascertain causes of mortality across all 3 species. But we also designed the study so that within the brood, we could determine whether or not the radio tracking was actually causing any additional chick mortality. Masked lapwing chicks were radio tracked on Phillip Island in East Victoria, Australia during the winter and spring of 2014. Red-capped plover chicks were radio tracked at a disused saltworks, as I mentioned before, west of Melbourne. And hooded plover chicks were radio tracked during the spring and summer of 2016-17 across the entire Victorian coastline with the help of honours student Tom Schmidt and trained volunteer citizen scientists. So the objectives of this part of the study, at least, were within broods to determine if the attached radio transmitter influences the survival of the chicks, to assess how many causes of death for each species can be determined by radio tracking, and to describe those causes of death. Okay, so we tracked 50 masked lapwing chicks from 50 broods, 42 red-capped plover chicks from 42 broods, and 27 hooded plover chicks from 27 broods. The masked lapwing tracker was 1 gram, just over 1 gram. The red-capped plover tracker was 0.2 of a gram, and the hooded plover tracker was 0.45 of a gram, all of which were attached using a glue-on method, and we did our best to follow up broods daily. So here you can see the masked lapwing chick with the attached radio transmitter. So the method of radio transmitter attachment was to trim a small transmitter size portion of down on the chick's dorsal surface, to then super glue a cotton gauze layer to the underneath of the tracker, and then use eyelash glue to eyelash glue the tracker to the dorsal surface of the chick, and then again use super glue to super glue the down surrounding the trimmed section to the sides, and occasionally, if the down is long enough, to the top of that transmitter, and you can see its placement here on the masked lapwing chick. Here's an example of that same transmitter attachment procedure on a much smaller red-capped plover chick. And again, on a hooded plover chick, although the cotton gauze comfort layer in this particular example isn't quite as transmitter sized as the other two. So before going ahead, I should mention that all of these, the weights of these trackers were 5% or less than average chick mass at hatching. So in terms of results, chicks with a radio transmitter weren't any more or less likely to die when compared to their siblings, which is great. You can see the p-values here are quite generous. However, if you look down at these 3 graphs here, the blue solid line being the untracked chicks and the green solid line being the chicks with a radio transmitter, you can see there is a small but consistent decrease in survival across all 3 species. Now you can also see that this small amount of decrease in survival is within the standard error of the tracked chicks. So although it's noticeable across each example, it's still not statistically significant. In terms of cause of death for each species, the masked lapwings recorded the highest number of fates of chicks, so about 30% of deaths of each chick we could attribute to a potential cause. Next was the hooded plover chicks, where we managed to attribute a cause of death to about 15% of the cases where a chick died, and followed by red-capped plover, which we were unfortunately unable to determine any causes of death. And this is quite interesting because of for a couple of reasons, because of the huge fledgling success of this particular species. So we were, interesting enough, we happened to be running this radio tracking program at the same time as a really thorough fox eradication scheme that was occurring. So after you take away all the fledglings, so that tracked all the way to fledgling, you've only got 17 potential opportunities to find a chick carcass and determine cause of death, and unfortunately we weren't able to, and that was potentially because the red-capped plover chicks had the smallest transmitter with the smallest transmitter signal strength and battery life, as well as being the smallest species that can potentially be either swallowed whole. The chicks are only sort of 5.5 grams when hatched, swallowed whole, or picked up by an avian predator and flown off. So in terms of the actual predation events, one masked lapwing chick was taken out by a currawong. 7 were hit by vehicles, and an interesting thing about the ones hit by vehicles were that the majority of this actually occurred within the school holidays, when Phillip Island's the number of people down at Phillip Island increases dramatically, and there's potentially people who just have the holiday houses, aren't really aware of the birds' presences, and just drive about. Starvation was recorded as the cause of death for another 3, and 1 was knocked over, unfortunately, by a lawnmower. As I said, we weren't able to assess the causes of death for any of the red-capped plover chicks. However, we did manage to confirm cause of death by unknown avian predator in the hooded plovers on 2 occasions. And this was thanks to the tracker being found by itself next to a whole bunch of slightly degraded, to a point where you couldn't really tell the species, avian footprints. And one example, which I'll illustrate now, of a domestic dog. So this tracker was actually found, unfortunately, in a bin on a beach. So the tracked chick, as you can see here, was actually located in a dog waste bag with the tracked chick, and you can sort of see what's happened here. You've got all these signs about at beach entrances and near the areas where this threatened species is trying to raise its chicks, and you've got someone who's not been following the regulations with their off-lead dog. Their off-lead dog has bought this chick, which is now deceased to the owner, and they've panicked a bit and put it in the dog refuse bag and thrown that away in the bin, which is sort of an interesting in the fact that up until now we have heaps of data showing that the more off-lead dogs there are around hooded plovers trying to breed, the poorer the success. But there's hardly any chances where we've actually got that sort of silver bullet in terms of being able to prove definitively that it is that dogs are actually the problem in terms of witnessing. But this really helps us in terms of being able to show that yes, this is a problem through this example. Alrighty, so just wrapping up, the survival of the 3 species of chicks was not significantly affected by the attached radio transmitters, at least with our sample sizes. So there was small, non-significant reductions in chick survival in all 3 species. And this really needs to be sort of thought about for potential projects wanting to track chicks moving forward. Is the data we're gaining from tracking these chicks, so potentially 0 to 28% of track chicks you might actually find a mortality event for, is that data going to be worth a potentially drop in survival for that species, even if in our examples it's non-significant? As well as having to take into consideration the cost of radio tracking. So like I said before, for us it was really worthwhile. We got some really amazing data on the survival of red-capped plover chicks, as well as quite a lot of data on the mortality of the mortality events of lapwing and hooded plover chicks. But each project in the future is going to have to take what I've just mentioned into consideration. So finally, I'd just like to have a bit of shameless self-promotion. So this has recently gone up in Wildlife Research, and feel free to contact me if you'd like a copy. And I'd like to finish by thanking all of my supervisors, so Mike, Craig, Gronya, Peter, Marcel, and all the other students and volunteers who helped me out, and Laura, Kasun, Crystal, Tom, Parks Victoria, Phillip Island Nature Park, and the Deakin CIA and Holsworth Wildlife Research Endowment for funding this project. I'm not sure if we've got any time for questions. I'm probably on about 15 minutes.